Most of us use our phones every single day. The invention of mobile phones has revolutionized the way we communicate. However, only very rarely do we ask ourselves how we got to holding such a complex piece of technology. In fact, there's probably not a single person who could assemble a whole mobile phone just from its primary parts. The processes in which technology is built have become so complex that it is almost impossible to oversee all steps. Unfortunately, the production of these devices, specifically mobile phones and electric vehicles, relies heavily on raw materials, which leads us to the topic of today's video: cobalt mining in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Incredible video shows 9 Congolese miners unexpectedly popping out of a collapsed gold mine and tumbling down a steep slope as onlookers cry out in joy. The video shows a man frantically digging with a spade while a group of other men stand in a large circle around him, watching. All of a sudden, a miner pops out of the rubble, a rare happy ending to trapped miner story.
Cobalt is a key component in batteries, specifically lithium-ion batteries. Particularly, the Democratic Republic has created controversy due to poor working conditions, environmental degradation, and ethical concerns. Cobalt is a key ingredient for lithium-ion batteries, helping them hold a charge longer and making them more efficient, which is why they are so valuable today. But now, where does all this cobalt actually come from? So how come around 75% of the global supply of cobalt comes from the DRC? Cobalt is mostly mined in the southern part of the country, especially in the Katanga region, with Kolwezi as one of the main mining sites for cobalt and copper. The DRC has long been a major player in mineral mining. It's rich in materials like copper, coltan, diamonds, gold, tin, tungsten, zinc, manganese, and lithium. Basically a treasure trove of resources. This kind of abundance has led to centuries of exploitation, starting back in the colonial era when Belgium's King Leopold II notoriously forced the Congolese people to harvest rubber under brutal conditions. Today, with the boom in lithium-ion batteries, cobalt has become a huge part in the global economy. By the early 2000s, the DRC became the world's top producer of cobalt, now accounting for over 60% of the global supply. Artisanal and small-scale mining, ASM, is a term that describes workers, usually in the informal sector, who use their resources to mine, often relying on manual, low-tech and labor-intensive methods. Siddharth Kara is one of the main journalists investigating the cobalt mining industry in the Congo. According to Kara, the rise of the global informal sector in cobalt mining is closely linked to the boom and need for electricity and technology, specifically lithium-ion batteries, for electric vehicles and mobile phones. While large multinational corporations dominate formal extraction, artisanal mining plays a significant role in the mining industry. Economic hardship is the main reason for why so many local communities in the DRC turn to artisanal mining. Since these communities are often left with limited opportunities, cobalt mining represents one of the few ways to make a living, as it offers quick cash in regions like Kolwezi and Likazi. In Likazi, there are many abandoned sites that create space for local miners to enter these areas and extract raw materials. But some of these workers are children, working in heart-wrenching, devastating conditions. Workers there work long hours in dangerous conditions to scrape together enough cobalt to feed their families. Families are left with no other option than to send their children into the mines to contribute to household incomes. One major challenge is the exploitative relationship with middlemen between local miners and international markets. ASM workers are forced to sell their cobalt to these middlemen for very low prices. This system perpetuates a cycle of poverty for the miners and their families. There is a need for a change in this system. The relationship between ASM workers and middlemen highlights this even more. Large multinational corporations are among the primary beneficiaries of cobalt mining in the DRC. Companies in the tech and automotive sector, including giants like Tesla, Apple, and LG Chem, are one of the main beneficiaries, and they depend a lot on their electric batteries. These companies benefit from a steady supply of cheap cobalt, often sourced in complex global supply chains that mask the unethical practices that happen on the ground. China has emerged as one of the largest players in the global cobalt mining industry, even though they don't mine cobalt in their own country. So how can this be? Chinese companies such as China Molybdenum and Zijin Mining Group control a major portion of the DRC's cobalt mining operations. As China is one of the biggest producers in electric vehicles in the world, it is only in their interest to get their cobalt as cheap as possible, to maintain their advantage in the race for green technology. To achieve this, Chinese corporations have actively lobbied for access and favorable terms within the DRC's mining sector. The collaboration between the Congo and China started in 2007. Congolese President Joseph Kabila made a $6 billion infrastructure deal with China. This deal allowed China to extract 600,000 tons of cobalt in exchange for roads, railways, and hospitals. However, until now, there hasn't been any effort by China to accommodate for these promises. One mining supervisor in the DRC speaks on this issue.
Nous, en tant que Congolais, nous acceptons les étrangers venir travailler ici chez nous, mais dès qu'ils viennent chez nous ici, ils n'arrivent pas à nous respecter comme il se doit et commencent à nous faire travailler comme des esclaves.
Middlemen exploit the lack of access to formal markets there is for artisanal miners. This allows them to purchase cobalt at significantly lower prices than its global market value, and to profit by selling the cobalt at higher prices to international corporations. Due to this approach, those at the bottom of the supply chain remain impoverished. There are winners and losers in the mining industry. While multinational corporations and Chinese state companies make giant profits from cobalt mining, the artisanal miners and local communities suffer from dangerous working conditions, low wages, and environmental damage. One of the most dangerous aspects of ASM working is the use of makeshift tools. These miners regularly dig tunnels using their hands. The shafts that they dig go as deep as 30 meters without any structural support, ventilation, or masks. These tunnels are prone to collapse due to immense pressures on the ground of the people mining above. When these tunnels collapse, the workers get buried alive under tons of earth with no chance of survival. There's rarely anything that can be done to help after a tunnel collapses. The economic desperation of the workers forces them to continue despite knowing how dangerous these jobs can be. Cobalt dust, which miners are exposed to daily without any protective environment, has been linked to serious respiratory issues. The consequences of breathing this toxic mineral can be infectious and even cancer. Another human rights concern is the use of violence and intimidation to maintain control over mining sites. Reportedly, private security forces use guns to enforce order and protect the interests of the companies. This also involves keeping anyone out who does not belong to the site or who is trying to spy on what is happening. This has also been experienced by Siddharth Kara when he traveled to the cobalt mining sites in the DRC to see what's going on. Another of the main downsides of cobalt mining is its immense use of water and electricity. The use of water and electricity strains the scarce resources even more. Mining operations also generate toxic metals that contaminate the environment and destroy surrounding ecosystems. It also results in the contamination of local water supplies, soil, and air. Due to there being almost no environmental regulations, mining wastes accumulate and they are left behind once a mine is fully extracted. This can be detrimental to local flora and fauna. The long-term environmental consequences of cobalt extraction can include erosion, deforestation, and loss of biodiversity. These communities, often reliant on agriculture and natural resources for their livelihood, face increasing challenges as their environments degrade. Another major problem is air pollution. The release of toxic dust and emissions during the mining and refining processes cause severe air quality issues. Specifically, refining cobalt releases sulfur dioxide into the air, which contributes to acid rain. However, air pollution does not stay in the DRC. By allowing toxic emissions like sulfur dioxide to enter the atmosphere, these companies not only harm local ecosystems and communities, but also contribute to global pollution and put everyone's lives at risk. Every ton of metal ore mined produces at least one more ton of solid waste. Over the last 20 years, Chinese state-owned companies have gained major control over cobalt mining sites in the DRC. Through initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative, in short, BRI, China has invested heavily, securing 15 out of 17 major cobalt mining operations in the DRC. With financial backing from the Chinese government, companies like China Molybdenum and Zhejiang Haiyou Cobalt secured the best contracts, often outbidding others. Chinese firms also use government-backed diplomacy to adjust mining regulations in their favor, avoiding reforms meant to protect the environment and local communities. For example, when the DRC tried to increase taxes on mining in 2018, Chinese companies lobbied for a delay, securing a 10-year grace period on cobalt royalties. This influence extends beyond the DRC, as Chinese companies also benefit indirectly from US electrical vehicle subsidies, which fuel cobalt demand. By controlling most of the DRC's cobalt, Chinese companies dominate the global market and use lobbying to shape policies to their advantage. Now, let's look at a few solutions. One approach is to reduce the reliance on lithium-ion batteries by using other types of batteries. For example, there are alternatives like iron phosphorus, manganese, and nickel that could be potential replacements for these batteries, though these options are often involved with higher costs. The idea is that by decreasing reliance on cobalt, companies can lessen their dependence on cobalt mines in high-risk areas. A second approach would be excluding ASM mined cobalt. This approach aims to prevent cobalt from artisanal and small-scale mining from entering the formal supply chain due to the associated risks of human rights abuses. However, enforcing this is challenging because many companies lack full visibility over their cobalt sources, making it difficult to completely avoid ASM-sourced cobalt. A third solution would be for companies to step in and formalize the ASM sector. Instead of excluding ASM, another solution encourages integrating ASM cobalt into the formal supply chain by formalizing it. This means simplifying registration procedures for miners, enforcing penalties for misconduct, and building ASM associations and partnerships. By supporting formalization, the industry can create safer and more transparent working conditions for small-scale miners. The extraction of cobalt in the DRC presents human rights, environmental, and economic challenges for the people in the area. ASM workers, many of whom have children, work in heart-wrenching, devastating conditions for little pay. Surrounding communities especially suffer from the environmental degradation and other consequences. Multinational corporations, particularly Chinese state-owned corporations, have leveraged their influence and power to shape their policies in the DRC to their favor. This leads to a further exacerbation of these problems. Addressing these problems requires an approach that increases transparency, stricter labor protections, corporate accountability, and sustainable alternatives to cobalt. As the world comes closer to a net zero future, we must ensure that green technologies do not come at costs of human dignity and environmental integrity. Please like and share this video.